everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Future of Data Security. Today I'm speaking with Myke Lyons, a CISO at Cribl, a great company. Myke, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, John, great to meet with you today, and nice to looking forward to having this conversation with you.
So, you have the world's most interesting background. I was checking your LinkedIn before. You went from a chef, you went to culinary school, you went through so many interesting startups, and today you're at Cribl as the CISO. I'd love to learn more about your journey. First of all, why? What is this about? And maybe a little bit about what's the most surprising skill from your culinary days that you'd say makes you a better CISO.
Yeah, there's two. So I'll answer your last question first, and then we'll kind of walk back from there. First off, work ethic. I have to say, working in a kitchen is just physically one of the most demanding things you can do. It's obviously not very cool in there, and there's typically a lot of people yelling at you. So I think work ethic was a big one. And the second thing, and I use it all the time as a security person, recipes are effectively, having your mise en place is critical to a security practice, right? Knowing what your steps you're going to be taking, making sure you have the right things in place before taking those steps and following them are fantastic. And there's been tons of tech companies that have even modeled recipes as a means for delivering software. But in terms of how do you get there from here, I figured every one of your guests would have been a chef first and then a security person. Is that I guess that's not so common.
No, you're the
Um,
first. You're the first.
well, fantastic. So I needed a summer job. I had a good friend who had an IT service company, and he needed someone to pick up big printers and put them down. And I was that person. The woman who I was partnered with, she was smaller than most of the printers, and so it just wasn't fair for her to lift up these giant boxes. However, she was brilliant in terms of installing these things and being able to do all that IT stuff. So it was an area of my brain that I was absolutely not using. I was not a tech person. I wasn't a gamer. I didn't really use a computer growing up. My wife coincidentally taught me how to copy and paste. So I just had this void that I somehow wanted to fill with security. So for my few years in IT and then quickly switched into security. And most of my learning in IT came from me looking at ways to break things and then build them back up, hopefully stronger or safer.
I was so excited to speak to you today because of what Cribl does and how smart it is. Because when I started Coesh a few years ago, I spoke to the CISO at JP Morgan, and he said, John, it's crazy. Every day we're aggregating a petabyte of logs, petabyte scale of logs, and we already know this approach is a dead end. It's crazy. We have to bring more intelligence to the edge. And I'm passionate about that. I think the technology today is going to unlock a lot of these use cases where you don't need to centralize all these petabytes of data to do something. You could probably do something right where the edge is, right on an endpoint, right where it matters. And I'm really excited to hear your perspective on this, both from a CISO. Data volumes are increasing incredibly. I think security has to change, but also from the perspective of logging, which is really what you guys are the world champion at Cribl. Where do you want to start? I want to make good
Yeah.
use of our time.
You're spot on, and the CISO that you spoke with, the JP, is spot on as well with regards to the quantity of data. The last check, I think we're at 28% compound annual growth rate of data, and unfortunately, as our CEO likes to remind us, our budgets are not growing at that same rate, unfortunately. So we are constantly looking at ways to extract the more important points or important data points and maybe discarding or putting in different places the lower critical information. So I like to think about things from a data perspective as like a hierarchy. At the top, you have the information that is absolutely critical for you to be able to deal with a security event. And you typically are going to send that over to one of your indexing systems, your SIM. I know that's what I do with mine. I take those information that I know I really need to log on, log off data, etc., send those over to the SIM, right? Those are the top tier things. The next one might go over to my data lake, my security data lake, what have you. And I might want to use that as part of my deeper investigation in dealing with security related things. And there's a few other layers, but I think there's the drop layer, and then the layer above that. This is the layer that you need to collect the data, maybe regulatory reasons. you may never use it, right? You may have to have something for 7 years, and in that 7 years, you're required to store it. So I might put that in the most dehydrated, frozen, ice cold related storage vessel that I have, the cheapest tier. And when I need to bring it back, I know that I have it. When I need to search it, I know that I can still do that. And I might be able to also say, this data here for the SIM may also need to go to that cold dry storage place, the cold dehydrated storage place. I need to have that autonomy to be able to do that. I also would like to potentially send data to one or two places, but maybe adjust the format. And one example there, in my experience, is that I used to have a security vendor that was acquired. They acquired a company that was acquired by a company that was acquired by a company. And the logging standard that they used for every company they acquired in every instance was to rewrap the log in their own standard. And this particular log entry, every single one of them had four different date and time stamps, and they were all different. So just bloat, just pure bloat. Unfortunately, none of those date and time stamps were Unix time. So my team really loved to use Unix time. It's nice and programmable. It's easy to predict. You know exactly what it looks like, less spaces, etc. Now, what you can do is you can actually reformat, drop all four of those, rewrite that particular log. So you're shrinking this thing down 70, 80% of size, and data moving around. The larger it is, the longer it's going to take. The more data, the more expensive. So we can reduce the size and also, normalize those data to be more effective for you as a security person, or maybe a data scientist or machine learning engineer. They can better leverage the data.
I'm really curious about a problem I think all of our customers have at Cohash, and in the logging space is the same thing. Prices keep increasing along with the volume of data. And we've seen all kinds of, log aggregation companies. For a time, they'll be heavily VC backed, they'll do a flat rate, but it's not really sustainable. It's not really tied to any real advancement or architecture that would lend itself to that pricing. Are we going to be able at some point to make ever increasing pricing a thing of the past? How close are we to that?
I wish I had a super positive answer for you there. Probably not. But what you do have the flexibility to do, and this is something that I'm a big fan of, is you could actually move your data or move your systems to be pointing at new systems much easier with a system like a Cribl. You could have, the multi-destination story. And another use case, and I see this all the time because I do get a chance to talk to a ton of CISOs. I'm part of a bunch of CISO networks, as most of us are. I get the opportunity to go to some of these security conferences and have really great conversations. I have the ability to test two particular technologies like for like on the same data. So I can have a better measurement as opposed to how I typically do POCs in the other spaces, as doing one after the other, but not with the same speed. And I think if you have that agency and the ability to switch between whatever vendor you'd like to switch with, I do think that might help keep vendors pricing a little bit more in check. At least that's what we've been hearing from the market.
I swear I'm not paid by Cribl. I'm just really interested in the way you guys do things. I was looking at it way before the interview. For the benefit of everyone, can you explain like what's new with the way you're doing smarter logs in terms of, pre-processing, reduction? What are the main advantages in, I don't know, like shifting left the intelligence you apply to logs in the supply chain?
So I would say the first and foremost, one of the most interesting things to me is just to actually have a data pipeline. That's not something that a lot of organizations have. However, when you look at what a data pipeline is and the general plumbing of them, if you will, they are pretty easy to understand. And, I want to move, server A or firewall A's information from here to one or two destinations or five destinations, whatever my needs are. And at the same time, I want to make sure they route this way, they look and feel this way. Now, Cribl got started with our first product called Stream. And I wish I had Stream earlier in my career. I actually did get my start in security in logging. That was my area of expertise. So I feel like we're coming back full circle back into the logging space, which is fantastic. The next thing is really being vendor neutral is super important to us. We don't want to pick a favorite. I think there's a bunch of great, amazing technologies. I am obviously a SIM customer myself of a third party, but also the data is yours. And I think that's really important. I've had, and I still have conversations with a lot of different vendors, not so much security vendors, but non security vendors that don't give me the ownership over my own information. Some of these are large CRM, large applicant tracking systems, where they think that the logs that I generate as part of me being a customer of their systems are for them. And so I think it's important for us as security people to have ownership over our data. And that doesn't just mean, being able to move it around or to get access to it, but also being able to store it where we want. So if I want to use some sort of an S3 bucket or our Azure Blob storage, or I have an on-premise storage solution, or Snowflake or Databricks, that's really up to me and me running my security business and giving me the opportunity to then leverage that information and still use it as part of my security program is critical. And that's where search, is fantastic, for our customers and myself included. Obviously, being a security person and being a Cribl employee, it's my responsibility to be the best customer of Cribl. If I wasn't, I'd be failing at my job. But our team here, our security team here, uses all of our technologies day in and day out to better secure our environments. And I love to hear some of the stories about how our customers are making better moves, reducing costs, creating efficiencies, getting better training done using technologies like ours.
I saw that you have an extensive background in startups, so I have to believe you must believe in eating your own dog food.
Yes, sir. You've got that right. And so we have this where you see my shirt, nerd herd. We our goats are our thing, and we are the first herd. So we're the first of the group within the company to adopt our new technologies. I love new technologies, and one of the cool things is that a lot of these startup companies they actually use Cribl on the back end, so they don't have to build telemetry pipelines. So if they want to ship their customer their data, their logs, or if they just want to move the logs on the back end, they end up using it. There's also, it's a free tier for a lot of these startups where in the beginning money's tight, so they can use our technology. And when they have a larger group of customers, maybe then they hit the tiers at which the pricing kicks in.
Maybe since you work with so many startups and I saw you were CISO at SNCC too, can you double click on what would be a recurring a set of challenges that you've observed in fast growing startups when it comes to security?
Definitely switching gears here, the way that I think about this stuff. First and foremost, you need to have a security culture within the whole organization. Now, that sounds really good. And if someone could make me a magic wand that I could wave and then immediately the security culture is turned around, please, I will pay an exorbitant amount of money for one of those. The reality is building trust with your end user population, your customer population is really hard to do. It takes a lot of transparency. It takes a lot of partnership. I believe that we at Cribl and other organizations I've worked in, we employ the best people. I look at their strengths. I look at their opportunities for improvement, and I focus on those things. And I make sure that I can partner with them and giving them and enabling them to do to make secure decisions, right? Make solid decisions. One thing that we do is we try to make ourselves present to them without introducing too much friction or without slapping them on the wrist. I just think that that's not a very valuable not a very valuable approach to making companies safer. So in an instance of that, perhaps, we have an employee who might have a, LinkedIn account. Surprise, surprise. In that LinkedIn account, we notice that they don't have multi-factor authentication turned on. We will notify the user. That's not a Cribl account, right? That's not something that we manage on their behalf. But it is one of those important little nudges or encouragements that help them make better security decisions. I also I am a fan of phishing simulations. I think that certain security folks have different opinions there. I wasn't a big fan in the beginning. I actually felt like it was my job just to stop all phishing attacks. Realized that that's actually next to impossible, if not impossible. But what I want to do by going through these phishing simulation activities, I want everyone to go through the process, and I want to be able to level them up by making those targeted phishing simulations harder and harder. And if they hit a certain threshold, they should be rewarded because they're not only, sure, they were really hard to break into. They're really solid. I want to reward that good knowledge, that good experience and skills they have in some way. I think that, even monetarily rewarding people, giving micro bonuses. We at Cribl, when you join the company, if you do your security awareness training in the first 7 days, we actually give you a bonus. We actually give you a small bonus. Just things that we want to encourage great behavior. Money does tend to be effective there. Maybe in the future we'll have the ability to give out more interesting, challenge coins and things like that to our security champions.
Money talks. The incentives are always key to getting the desired effect. It is what it is. I've seen some of these latest vendors and technologies for phishing, and it's so good. I would say pre LLM, it kind of sucked. It was too easy to catch, but nowadays you're gonna turn everyone into paranoiac, Mike. It's actually pretty strong.
Good. We'll all be safer. Now, tinfoil hats are challenging to wear at all times, but they are effective.
We did a bit of a weave into your, startup experience. I want to come back to really what you guys are doing at Cribl, and I'd love to ask about AI and how you feel that it's going to change the data pipeline, the observability business. What are the big use cases, the big advantages, the big changes that are perhaps already there or coming shortly?
Yeah. The first sort of things that we're doing here is helping you using machine learning. We are helping people write queries. And if you take that idea and you kind of run with it for a minute or so, what do you want to do? I want to be able to ask questions of my data, right? And be able to get back the results that I expect. So, working towards that is a key thing for us as an organization. I know what I want to I know the questions that I have, right? I just don't want to necessarily have to know exactly how to translate that into KQL or something along those lines. That's important for me. And I've seen that happen where you have an early tier one analyst who's trying to write a query and they're banging away on the keyboard and they're screaming and yelling at their keyboard and they're looking at their friend for help. And the reality was they had like a semicolon in the wrong spot, right? And it's just completely screwing up their ability to respond. So if we can reduce that toil and just make these things more effective using machine learning, I'm all in. That's something we're working on. The next one is building out pipelines. Some pipelines are very unique. The majority of them are not. A lot of them are just very similar. Data A going, system A, routing in this way, modified in this way to this destination. And so we're creating pipelines quickly and using machine learning, to make those things quite smart and much easier for folks. So it gets them up and running faster, and they don't necessarily need to interact with every part of the organization to get these things executed. Down the line, I would love to see us being able to further curate that information, making it very specific. So if I'm training a model, I know that various pieces of information regarding that model, those things are going to be, I'm going to want to keep those. But on the other side, I might not necessarily need all of those, those other data elements. So that's not necessarily feeding in. We're also looking at ways where maybe when an application was written, it wasn't written with the best considerations in mind, and they might be taking a sensitive data field and dumping it into a log. It would be great to be able to identify that information and strip it out and never actually perpetuate the problem by sending it over to another system. So that sensitive data, being able to redact that information is critical. And this is where getting context around these things, understanding that this application may be a healthcare application or a payments application or carding application or something along those lines. This is where LLMs will help you get these things better. Even just, are these 5 digits just a random number, or are these 5 digits actually a zip code indicative of, some sort of post address or something like that?
The first thing you said for me is very exciting. I feel that we're about to enter an era that's very empowering because at the beginning of the 2000s, the API came about. If you didn't have a REST API, you were a loser. Nowadays, I feel that we're moving into the era of intent. You don't need to know about anything. You just need to have an intent, and you'll be able to use an MCP server or something else and get what you need. That's going to be incredibly empowering. It feels like we're about to really dramatically enhance our ability to connect systems, to do things. You feel the same way?
I couldn't be more excited about being in technology right now. As excited as I have been, there were a few years where a lot of what we were doing was sort of bog standard, right? You'd walk in, you could do the same 5 things, and that mundane work wasn't going away. It was just there, and it was always there. Now, I think there's so many opportunities for that mundane work to completely just, not evaporate, but move over to some sort of new capability, new technology. The ideas that are coming out of folks as they're building new tech is it's awesome. It's the coolest shit I've seen in my career in tech. And I've been really, I'm like I said, I couldn't be more encouraged by it. I also I forced myself in the beginning. Now I don't. Now, oh my gosh, it's like, it's sitting right next to me helping me every day. I use LLMs continuously. I use them all day. And today I'd probably use an LLM 15 to 20 times. And what got me there, maybe a practice that I'd suggest others would look at, is forcing yourself to do about 15 minutes a day. Just thinking about things, not in the concept of like an internet search, like a Google search, but understanding that these things are way more comprehensive. Looking at prompt engineering, and even just using an LLM to learn about prompt engineering. By spending 15 minutes a day in the beginning, I went from kind of using it here and there, maybe reword some stuff, to it's fundamental to everything that I do, whether it's, looking at taking a picture of my refrigerator and saying, generate me a recipe that might include an emphasis of zucchini because it's the summer months, to something more sophisticated, various, taking people's backgrounds and putting them together and being able to engage with them in a conversation that would be more meaningful to them.
It's so funny. I've been a power user too, especially if you want to quickly. I like to dictate. I'll dictate an email, then I'm like, okay, make that, pretty. But I used to do a lot of copy paste from OpenAI to my email. We developed recently a very simple Chrome extension. I'll share it with you if you want. You can put your own model, your own key. But what it does is you select the text, and you could have a shortcut like improve, translate. It'll apply the prompt to the text you've selected inside Google Gmail or wherever you are. And, there's so many small things like that. You can suddenly dramatically improve your productivity. With that said, I'd love to maybe hear from you as a CISO. What are some of the hacks or specific use cases where you really feel that leveraging these LLMs, you're saving time, it's more valuable for you?
Yeah, and then we have to talk about the things that scare me to death about these things too. So I would say first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of the crit prompt engineering context. So CRIT, the context role interview task. I find that to be super useful. My team embrace it and use that prompt engineering model to get really solid outcomes. The second thing we've been in place with this for a bit is our email security capability. So usually when you have, we do phishing scanning and things like that, we're always looking for, spam and capabilities there. But what this particular vendor does on top of all those things is we have a user report a phish to us. We actually don't receive the alert here in my security team. It goes to us to an agent. It actually goes to an AI agent, and that particular agent will further parse that particular message. And I was nervous about deploying something like this, as you would anticipate. And email is important for outbound. Email is very important for our business. Inbound email is also important, but less, maybe less so. So using that capability, it actually detects it's a much better analysis on these things. A lot what a tier one analyst or even just a tier two analyst would be able to detect. And then if it finds it in terms it says, hey, this actually was a phish, it then goes and does the hunt across the environment. So it looks across my estate, my mail store for other instances of the same message. This is stuff that my tier two analysts have been doing for many years. But now they have the ability to just learn about that it's already been done. The the second thing, and this is something that I'm really excited about, and there's a bunch of technologies that are hitting on parts of this, some are hitting on all of it. It's to take a series of events that have occurred and turn them into a small blurb that just tells me in a nice cohesive way what it is that I've just looked at. And not only that, but then gives me sort of a pseudo rating on it. Like, hey, this is a funny looking thing. Sam Smith has connected to, to authenticate it against your Okta system. They have used MFA, but they're coming from a VPN. They don't normally use a VPN, and they're coming from the UK, and today they're not in the UK, right? Or we know that they're typically not in the UK. Now, as an analyst, that's a great little summary of what has occurred there. But also as an analyst, I can ascertain from there and say, well, so they're coming from a VPN. They don't typically use one. Should I just ask them? Should the AI just ask them? Are you using, NordVPN because you want to stream the BBC, and you forgot to turn it off before you authenticated and wanted to update your CRM? These are just such time-saving activities for my folks. I'm so excited, and the amount of opportunities beyond that, those are just a couple of use cases, are just there's just so many great opportunities to unlock the potential here.
Yeah, it's very exciting, especially to start to automatically introduce the end user in the security. You've given a great example, like maybe it sends Microsoft Team chat or a chat and ask a question, then the case is closed automatically.
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually built our own bot for some of this stuff as well within the security team to interact with our users. And that is like, hey, you're using a leaked password on this particular, account online. It may not be a Cribl account because we would disable that quickly. But if it was a non-Cribl account, we still known bad passwords nudge the person, try to, again, going back to the earlier cultural thing, just give them, just let them know that, there's an opportunity for them to improve their security posture.
What's your prediction? I've talked to a lot of people that say, we're using a bot now, we're automating. When will we see a full on, virtual or AI SOC analyst that can do, say, 80% of the routine tasks that are happening?
I think we are months away from a full tier one analyst. At the moment, I would equate what I've seen to a few interns doing smart things. So, smart people that don't necessarily have the experience is sort of how I would say I'm seeing it. A lot of it comes down to the data that you have, however. So the more that you have there, the better these things will be able to do. If you have a ticketing system that has tens of thousands of tickets that reside in there of how you've handled every security incident in your history, you're obviously going to be able to automate a lot of those things pretty quickly. But if you are just collecting all of the information about what's going on and you're reacting, you can also speed up that adoption. We're not an old company. I don't have, 10, 20 years of security tickets. But I do have a really comprehensive security telemetry collection, and I'm able to train my models there. Then bring in threat intelligence. All of those things start to come together. So I'm super excited to be able to detect these TTPs, go look this way, also be able to write better rules. We're big detection just code shop here. I'm a huge fan of detection engineering. So being able to get those rules together, helping me write better detection rules, all these things I'm super excited about.
Mike, maybe to wrap things up, I'm really interested if you would have a big lessons learned or a piece of advice to give yourself when you were starting, as it were, as a chef, or maybe to someone starting their careers right now.
And so, I mean, as a chef, practice cutting onions faster than you ever have. That's the fastest way to make a chef, or budding chef or a cook, maybe at the time, prep cook. Learn how to cut an onion fast. Learn how to brunoise a small dice slice as fast as you possibly can. Consistent knife cuts, sharp knives. That's what matters the most. Watch a ton of YouTube videos. YouTube wasn't around when I went to culinary school. As a security person, like I was saying earlier, 15 minutes a day. Get in there, use it, make it part of your daily workflow. Don't necessarily just go jump into any model that comes out. Have a little bit of scrutiny. Not all MCP servers are a good idea, and some of them are pretty crap. And if I was giving advice to security folks that are just starting at a new firm, I would say leverage your third parties as best you can. Do a real pen test. You don't know what you don't know, and there's some really smart people out there that you can leverage at point in time. Absolutely bring them in. Have them, let them have at you. They're going to find some stuff. It's going to give you a good opportunity to find where the attackers are thinking. And yeah, and from the maybe last but not least, do design the data architecture pretty early on in your journey. It is really complicated to undo bad data decisions. The earlier you can start governing, routing, quarterbacking, whatever analogy you'd like to use, the better off you are.
Well said. Before we wrap, if people want to follow along with your work, what's the best place for them to go?
I am LinkedIn. I consume Twitter. I don't or X. I don't really post on there. I consume it. So I would say LinkedIn is definitely the best way. And if if you're at one of the larger security events, Black Hats coming up, reInvent, which is a little bit less security but still security, or RSA, by all means. But and also check out Cribl.io. Check out our trust portal. Huge advocate for those sorts of things. The transparency model extends beyond just Cribl. We're big advocates for it across the whole market.
Fantastic, Myke. Really fun conversation. Let's keep in touch. Thank you again for joining.
Jean, thank you very much for the opportunity, and it's good to chat with you today.